And I was wondering, how do you decide what you invest your time and money in?
Yeah, well, I like to find businesses that have good economics. Now, what are good economics? Well, good economics are a business that has some kind of a moat around it that makes its product or its service or its location or something a little more desirable than to the customer than any other sort of comparable product. You know, the number one candy bar in the last 30 or 40 years has been Snickers. People don't fool around with different candy bars. They fool around with different length dresses, they fool around, you know, with all kinds of things, but they don't fool around with candy bars because they figure, you know, they're going to go in and lay out 50 cents or whatever it is and put it in their mouth. And they're not going to, for 50 cents and putting it in your mouth, I mean, you're not going to say, I'll lay out 45 cents and put something else in my mouth. So you find that very stable. And we like businesses that we think we can figure out where they're going to be in 10 or 15 years. I don't know where the information technology businesses are going to be in 10 or 15 years. I know where Snickers bars are going to be in 10 or 15 years. They're going to be selling just about this, you know, the way they do now. I know where Wrigley's gum is going to be in 10 or 15 years. There's not going to be a lot of innovation in chewing gum. The internet's not going to cause people to quit chewing gum either. I mean, at least, I mean, Gates may think so, but I don't think so. But it's predictability regarding the sustainability of a competitive advantage, something special about a product.
Okay, so Warren Buffett was all about think long term. I totally agree with Warren Buffett because there's two things in there. One is you got to have a vision. So when you're thinking long term, you're having a vision, not for just today, but for the future, for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And also he talked about having more of a lifestyle. So if you're gonna think long term, you gotta think of the lifestyle aspect of it and also the vision aspect of it. And I think that's where a lot of people miss sometimes, because when you can think long term or have a vision, then you can attach your identity to that. And it makes it easier to have a lifestyle.
What was the lifestyle point he made?
Because he's talking about Snickers and people make up their decision, or they don't have to think about it because it's part of their lifestyle. And Snickers is a household brand name, and we all know the commercial, Snickers, it satisfies you. So you use Snickers as a example when he's talking about long term. We don't think about Snickers as brand recognition. We know it, we love it, and don't change the taste of it, and it fits our lifestyle, especially when we want more energy.
Questionable about the energy, but okay.
Oh, Snickers give you energy. When I was in college and I needed energy for my next class, all I did was eat a Snickers candy bar. Boom, I was ready to go.
All right, boom. Drew, what do you got?
Well, so in the context of Snickers, he was really talking about like the moat that it has built. It obviously has a lot of brand recognition, and it is something that people have maybe positioned in their lifestyle as something that they tend to go to. But what he primarily said in the clip was how, because that it's a factor of lifestyle, you can actually predict how it's going to perform over the long term. So whereas at the point in time when this film was done in 1999, tech companies were just getting started, coming out of the gate. There was a lot of hype and belief around it being the future, but it didn't have it hadn't proved itself out. Obviously, in hindsight, as we look here in 2022, obviously it worked out for a lot of companies, but obviously you had the tech bust, and Warren and his investing style, the way that he looks at everything is how do I ensure that when I am buying this company or a piece of this company, how do I look at it from the perspective of I'm going to hold on to this thing forever? And how is that company going to sustain over the long term as opposed to just being, the fad of the day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs, what we need to figure out is what pieces of what we're doing will be around for a long time, because we don't have established businesses, right? We don't have a giant moat around their business yet. We don't have, decades of brand built in. That's what Warren Buffett's looking at buying. So what do we have? We've got a mission that should never change, right? I mean, I'm trying to solve the world's biggest problem. I'm gonna be helping entrepreneurs believe in themselves forever. The way I do that might change and adjust over time, but that mission that I'm on will never change. And so that's an easy starting point. Like, what is the mission? What's the world that you're trying to create that no matter what happens, what new technology comes out, you're now 95 years old and you still care about what, right? Figuring that out can be really helpful. The second thing is, what are some of the skills you can develop that will serve you for the long run? So as an example for me, the ability to speak into a camera will serve me for a long time. Whether it's still my iPhone and we're sitting in a hotel room in Vegas with Zan and Drew in 10 years, 20 years making content like this, or it's something else, right? I just filmed a VR course for my book, Built to Serve, and that's still me just talking to a camera. And so the ability to be able to communicate a message into a lens will serve me for a very long time. And so breaking down in your own business, what are some of the elements that if you got really good at this skill, paired with your mission, will set you up for success for a very long time, because you don't have enough predictability yet in your business, because a lot can change because you're just starting up. So I think that's how I would apply the advice, is what are the long-term elements between your mission and the skills that you can learn that can help you best set yourself up for long-term success.
Love it.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
The best investment I ever made, well, I bought a book in 1949 by a fellow named Ben Graham called The Intelligent Investor. I don't remember what I paid, but aside from what I paid for my 2 marriage licenses, that was the best investment I ever made. It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And frankly, you're most likely to find them when in periods like 5 years ago when we were having the panic. I mean, stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going into the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else, because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that. And when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names.
How do you deal with failure? And what's your advice to young entrepreneurs like me in this case, especially with regards to failure and how to approach it?
Yeah, well, if you fail, you really do dust yourself off and get right back in. I mean, you're going to fail at some things. You're going to have some human relationships that don't work out. Fairly significant number of people get divorced. I mean, that's a very big decision to have turn out badly. But I think if you study almost everybody and read Kay's book, Personal History, and everybody fails at some things. I mean, particularly when you're younger. I mean, you do have less experience in evaluating humans and just knowing about whatever it may be businesses. But it is not fatal. I mean, if you're healthy and you live in this, particularly living in this country, there's going to be an opportunity that comes along. I got turned down for the Harvard Business School when I got out of the University of Nebraska. And I remember, I went to Chicago to get interviewed. This is when you traveled on the train, and so I spent 10 hours going there. And this fellow looked at me and
about 10 minutes, he said, forget it, Bell.
Wow.
And now I got to go back on the train 10 hours and think, what am I going to tell my dad? What am I going to tell my dad? I mean, my dad always told me I could do anything, and everything. Now I've just gotten turned down. But it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because then I went to Columbia, where Ben Graham was. In fact, it probably even affected who I married, because I took a 1-year course at Columbia instead of 2 years at Harvard, and she might have found some other guy during that time. And almost everything in my life that looked like a failure has either usually it's turned into a success. I mean, the world isn't over. If you have bad luck in health, that's tough. I mean, there's just no getting away. I've been lucky on that. But the other kind of things, if you're healthy and you're bright and you've got decades ahead of you, if something goes wrong, if you find yourself working for the wrong employer and they're doing things you don't approve of, or they're not treating you fairly, the world isn't over yet. You just go out and find somebody else. I should mention one thing about reading. It was at the library here at Columbia that I wish I spent probably more time than any other student. I lived there practically, but I pulled a book out there, happened to be Who's Who in America, and it told me something about my professor, Benjamin Graham, and then I looked up and I went to the library and I said, I want to learn more about this because I learned this over here. Mm-hmm. That changed my whole life. We own Geico now because of that librarian directing me to some other book and then following through on that. Mm-hmm. It's the chance. I read about 1/5 the pace that Bill does, but I still spend 5 or 6 hours a day reading. I mean, you can learn so much. I particularly love biography. Just, to be able to live the lives of these people that have been so extraordinary, the lessons and the discouragements they face, just everything about it. So you can't get enough of reading.
How do you decide what you invest your time and money in?
Yeah, well, I like to find businesses that have good economics. Now, what are good economics? Well, good economics are a business that has some kind of a moat around it that makes its product or its service or its location or something a little more desirable to the customer than any other sort of comparable product. The number one candy bar in the last 30 or 40 years has been Snickers. People don't fool around with different candy bars. They fool around with different length dresses, they fool around, with all kinds of things, but they don't fool around with candy bars because they figure, they're going to go in and lay out 50 cents or whatever it is and put it in their mouth. And they're not going to, for 50 cents and putting it in your mouth, I mean, you're not going to say, I'll lay out 45 cents and put something else in my mouth. So you find that very stable. And we like businesses that we think we can figure out where they're going to be in 10 or 15 years. I don't know where the information technology businesses are going to be in 10 or 15 years. I know where Snickers bars are going to be in 10 or 15 years. They're going to be selling just about the way they do now. I know where Wrigley's gum is going to be in 10 or 15 years. There's not going to be a lot of innovation in chewing gum. The internet's not going to cause people to quit chewing gum either. Gates may think so, but I don't think so. But it's predictability regarding the sustainability of a competitive advantage, something special about a product.
If you were to do it all over again, you're in our shoes, what industry would that be in? Where would you start your own business today?
I'd do the same thing. Yeah. I mean, for one thing, I'd be a failure at anything else probably. I had fun when I was in my 20s, my 30s. Now I'm 86 and I'm having fun. And so I advise students as much as possible, look for the job that you would take if you didn't need a job. I mean, don't sleepwalk through life, and don't say it's all going to be great. I'll do this and I'll do that, and I'm just marking time till I get to be older. As I've told people, that's like saving up sex for your old age. I mean, it just is not it is not a good idea. Yeah.
What are you urging them to do?
I'll explain it. Just what I'm talking about. Now, you really want to be doing what you love doing. And you can't necessarily find it on your first job. Right. But don't give up before you find it.
It is always being ahead of the game rather than getting behind the game. It's saving a little, no matter how you do it. I mean, I delivered papers, I worked at Penny's, I sold golf balls, I had a pinball machine around. I did a lot of things that enabled me to accumulate about $10,000 by the time I got out of school. 10,000 doesn't go as far now as it did then, but having anything so that you're ahead of the game and not getting behind the game is enormously important. I mean, just, you know, if you're going to run a 100-yard dash against a bunch of people in life, if you can figure it out so that when the gun goes off, you're 10 or 15 yards ahead instead of 10 or 15 yards behind, it's going to make an enormous difference in how that race comes out. So having some net resources doesn't make much difference whether they're in stocks or bonds, in my view, but and not having debt when that gun goes off when you get out of school is a huge plus over being behind the game. And you know, it may come from delivering a paper out in the morning. It may come from part-time work someplace, but put aside a few dollars for yourself, so that when the time comes and you enter the workforce, you're ahead of the game and not behind. And then once you get there, don't get behind by buying a whole lot of things that you figure you're going to pay for someday while you're paying 20% interest in between.
You will move in the direction of the people that you associate with. So it's important to associate with people that are better than yourself, and actually the most important decision many of you make, not all of you, will be the spouse you choose. Right. And you want to associate with people who are the kind of person you'd like to be. You'll move in that direction, and the most important person by far in that respect is your spouse. I can't overemphasize how important that is, and you're right. The friends you have, they will form you as you go through life, and make some good friends, keep them for the rest of your life, but have them be people that you admire as well as like them.
Is there a meaningful distinction to be drawn between making money out of investment and making money out of speculation? It's always a bet, isn't it? It's always a gamble.
No, it isn't a gamble. There is a real distinction. Basically, it's subjective, but an investment attitude, you look to the asset itself to produce the return. So if I buy a farm and I expect it to produce $80 an acre for me in terms of its revenue from corn and soybeans, and it costs me $600. I'm looking at the return from the farm itself. I'm not looking at the price of the farm every day or every week or every year. On the other hand, if I buy a stock and I hope it goes up next week, to me that's pure speculation.
There can be all kinds of wonderful investment opportunities out there that I don't understand. I don't know what cocoa beans are going to do next year. You know, maybe you know, but I don't know. I don't know what crude oil is going to sell for. But I don't have to know. I just have to know the things. I have to know what I know. I have to know where the limits of my understanding are, what I call what my circle of competence is. And if I'm only able to evaluate 5% of the businesses in the world, no problem. I just stay within that 5% and try and find something. And most people get in trouble in investments because they get itchy. You know, they can't discipline themselves, and they hear about other people making money. Nothing upsets people so much as to hear about their friends making money. I mean, that's very destructive to discipline, because they think, I'm smarter than that guy next door, and he just bought that new car with the money he made trading stocks on the internet, so why can't I? Well, the answer is you can't over time. You will lose money if you trade stocks actively. And it's hard to exercise the discipline. But anytime you buy something, you should be able to take out a one-page sheet of paper and say, I'm buying General Motors at 65. I'm buying General Electric at 150 because. And you should write down the reasons. If you can't fill out the sheet, if it's because somebody told me about it at a cocktail party last night, that's not good enough. If it's because my broker told me about it, that's not good enough. You've got to have a reason for thinking that it makes an intelligent investment. You do the same thing if you're buying a farm or an apartment house. If you're buying a farm, you'd say, I'm buying this farm at $1,000 an acre because I think I can earn $60 an acre on it if corn sells at such and such and soybean sells at such and yield is such and such. And you'd figure it out. That's the same reason you buy businesses. And when you buy stocks, you're buying a little piece of a business. And that's probably the most important thing to remember in investing, is that when you are buying a stock, you're buying a little piece of the business. And if you are buying it at an attractive price for the business, for the whole business, you're going to make money. And if you aren't, over time you won't make money.
Charlie Munger and I have been making stock decisions and business decisions one way or another together now for 55 years. We have never let, well, the macro doesn't enter into it, nor does political. We have not made decisions differently because one party or the other's in power. We have not made decisions based on whether we thought interest rates were going to go up or down, or what was going to happen with labor negotiations someplace. You don't want to give up what you know how to do because of opinions which you don't know whether are right or not, and which are going to be transitory in any event. So you really go out there every day and do whatever makes the most sense. So when we buy the auto dealerships last week, we don't factor in anything about the Fed, about the deadlock in politics, about what's going on around the world. Those are all important things, but they don't affect whether those dealerships, which we're buying to own 100 years, they don't affect whether they're going to make money in the year 2024 or 2034 or 2044. And the important thing is whether we get a good business with good management at a sensible price. It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
I think you'll learn more about yourself if you do it that way. I bought my first stock when I was 11. I was at Rose Hill at the time, and I bought 3 shares of City Service Preferred at 38, and it went down to 27, which is something I still remember, even though I was 11 at the time. And then it went up to 40, and I sold it. I made $5 on my 3 shares after commissions, and then it went to 200 and something. So, I probably remember that a little better than if I'd been doing it on paper. And I fooled around doing a lot of things between about age 11 and 19 in the stock market. I did charts, I did all kinds of technical analysis, I read every book I could get on the subject. And I didn't do that well. I didn't do terrible, but I was really just floundering around. But that meant by the age of 19, when I read Ben Graham's book, I was at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, I went and bought this book called The Intelligent Investor, just come out, and it had an enormous impact on me. Now, if I hadn't done, in the previous 8 years, if I hadn't been all over the lot, I'm not so sure that book would have had the same impact on me. I mean, by that time, I was prepared to read Ben Graham's book, which changed my life financially in an incredible way. I mean, I wouldn't be up here today if I hadn't read that book. But yeah, part of life is getting prepared so that when something does happen that's significant, you can grasp the significance of it and know what to do with it. And I would say that first 8 years of fooling around, even though it produced nothing financially to speak of, produced a lot in terms of getting my mind prepared for when I really did read something that made sense. And so I was ready to accept it. And I actually went back and went to Columbia to study under Graham, and because of reading that book, and all kinds of things flowed out of it. So
there are lots of lousy businesses, and there's lots of wonderful businesses. And my job over the years has been to try and figure out which is which, and I've made plenty of mistakes. I bought a company called Dexter Shoes. In the early 90s, I paid $400+ million for it, and it made a lot of money before I bought it. But, as soon as I bought it, they pulled some switch or something, and it immediately started losing money. And it was because of foreign competition, so on, or maybe it was because I owned it, I don't know. And it went to zero. And the worst thing was that I'd paid for it in stock, so that $400 million in stock I gave at the time is now worth about $5 billion. So every time Berkshire stock goes down, I feel a little bit better because of my opportunity loss on this business. But when I looked at Dexter Shoe, they had a good position in retailers. They turned out good shoes. They had a great workforce, all kinds of things. But I just forgot one thing, that they weren't going to make shoes in the United States anymore. So you make mistakes, and it does pay to recognize quickly when you've made them. If you've got a good person running a business and it isn't making any money, you're in the wrong business, and you've got to face up to that. Stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that, and when you don't find them, you don't do anything. So that's my generalized stock tip, no names.
I would encourage you, if you're interested in the field, to do a few things. I'd still try and make it as intelligent as possible. I would try to stick with businesses I thought I understood. I'd still get out that sheet of paper, and I'd write, I'm doing this because, and just test my reasoning. And then I go back and read it a year later and see whether what you thought would be true turned out to be true. So I would always check myself. I believe in grading myself on everything. You know, doctors have postmortems, and they do it because they learn from postmortems. In business, people don't like to do postmortems. When I can be on the board of a company, and they can owners building plants or buying companies, and they never wanted 2 years later to run a check on how that decision turned out because it can be unpleasant. But you learn from postmortems, and you don't want to learn. It's way better to learn from other people's mistakes than your own, but you got to learn from a few of your own too. And the time to do it is when you're young.
Any word of advice you give to somebody who's a young investor who would like to emulate you, what you would recommend that they do to kind of build something close to what you've done?
I think you should look for the job that you would want to hold if you didn't need a job. I mean, you're probably only going to live once. Shirley MacLaine may differ with that, or a few people, and you don't want to go sleepwalking through life. And you really, whether you make X or 120% of X, really isn't remotely as important as to whether, in most cases, you marry the right person and you also find something that you would do if you didn't need the money. And I've had that job for 50 or more years, and I was lucky in that I sort of found early on what turned me on that way. But don't settle for something if you can possibly. Don't worry about making the most money this week or next month. I mean, when I offered to work for Ben Graham, I said I'll work for nothing, and I meant it. You know, I mean, just the idea of being turned on. So look for the job that turns you on. Find a passion. I don't know where I'm going to invest next. That's what makes my job interesting. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, if you went out and played golf and every drive went in the hole, you'd give up. The game wouldn't be interesting. I mean, what's interesting is when you get in the rough and have to come out and a few things like that. So I love the fact that I don't know what I'm going to do next. You mentioned the Israel investment. In 2006, in the fall, I got a letter from a fellow, and I never heard of him, and I never heard of the company he was talking about. But he said, my name is Eitan Wertheimer, and I want to tell you a little about my company, Ishkar. The letter was a page and a half long, and he said if he sold the company, the family sold the company, the only company they wanted to sell it to was Berkshire Hathaway. And if I was interested, they'd be glad to come over from Israel and explain it to me. And it just jumped off the page that this was an interesting idea. So I emailed them, and they came over very shortly, and we bought the business. We handed them $4 billion for 80% of a company where I'd never seen it or anything. Eitan kept saying, you got to come over to Israel and see the plants and everything. You won't believe how wonderful they are. And I said, Eitan, I don't go to Council Bluffs, Iowa. You know, I mean, I am doing fine in Omaha. And he said, no, you got to see it. I said, no, I don't. I said, we can make a deal without seeing it. He said, well, if you buy the company, will you come and see it? I said, if we buy the company, I'll come. So we bought the company, and I went over there, and it's true. I've never seen plants like this. It was the greatest operation I've ever seen. And Eitan said to me, he said, that's why I want you to come over to see these things. I said, listen, Eitan, if I'd come and seen them, I'd have paid more money. So we have a wonderful partnership with the people in Israel. But I don't know tomorrow. Our partnership with the people in Brazil, with Jorge Paulo Lemann and his associates, They are sensational people. I got to know Georgie Paulo when I was on the board of Gillette with him. And the opportunity to buy into a wonderful business like Heinz and to be partners, and they'll do all the heavy lifting. They run the place with Georgie Paulo and his associates. I mean, it's a great opportunity for us. And I don't know what the opportunity will be tomorrow. With Georgie Paulo, as last December, I was going out to Boulder, Colorado, where he had a group that met, and he said, I think I've got an idea might interest you when I get out there. And so I went out there, and as we came back on the plane, he explained what he was thinking about in terms of Heinz, and I said, count me in. And I will tell you one other thing, which is quite impressive about him. After I said that and went a little further in the thing, he sent me a one-page governance description of how it would work between the two of us, and he sent me a very brief description of what he thought would be a fair deal for both of us. I didn't have to change a word. I mean, those are the kind of people you like to associate with.
And what is your rule about investing?
Well, you want to be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy.
Right.
And I've got plenty of greed, so I'm just waiting for the fearful part. I mean, I love it when the things we buy go down. I mean, I get euphoric, you know. The stocks are down today, and I'm buying more of something I was buying yesterday. I'm buying it cheaper. Now, when you go to the grocery store and you buy something cheaper than you bought it the day before, you think that's terrific. But people with their stocks, they think that the stock knows more than they do. So that when the stock goes down, they say the stock is telling them something, you know. And what's telling me is I can get more for my money. but they take it as kind of a referendum on themselves, you know. And it's me versus the stock. If it ever gets back to what I paid, I'm going to sell it. Stock doesn't care what you paid. I mean, you have to remember, the stock doesn't even care that you own it. You are nothing to the stock. That stock is everything to you, you know. And you remember you paid $10.13, and therefore the stock should get to $10.13 before you sell it. You know, the stock has no feelings about you. You know? I hate to disillusion you on this, but it just doesn't care. And so the only question with every stock, every day, and you don't do it this frequently, is, can I get more for my money someplace else? You've got a chance to be in thousands and thousands of great businesses, and their prices change all the time, so their relative valuations change. And you can make the exchange at very low cost these days. Commissions are nothing. So you can always shift from one business to another. You have a huge advantage over Andrew Carnegie. You know, when he was in the steel business, he was in the steel business, or Rockefeller was in the oil business. He could not shift over immediately to retailing or something like that. You can rearrange your business empire, which you own through that little portfolio that you have. You can rearrange that, you know, at a moment's notice with practically no cost. It's a huge advantage, which people turn into a disadvantage. There is nothing about the price action of the stock that tells you whether you should keep owning it. What tells you whether you should keep owning it is what you expect the company to do in the future versus the price at which it's selling now, compared to the other opportunities of businesses that you think you know equally well, and make that same comparison. And that's all there is to owning stocks.
What would you think is the most important thing, the key in evaluating a company? I'm not asking about doing mediocre, I'm not asking about being average, but about excellent, remarkable. Just name one thing.
The most important thing is to be able to define which ones you can come to an intelligent decision on and which ones are beyond your capacity to evaluate. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, and he says, "It's going to change everything." And I said, "Well, will it change whether people chew gum?" And he said, "Well, probably not." And I said, "Well, will it change what kind of gum they chew?" And I said, "Well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers." You know, I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand, but there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, you know, and and I'll be able. I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate, and he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. In investing, there's no called strikes. People can throw Microsoft at me and, you name it, any stock, General Motors, and I don't have to swing. And nobody's going to call me out on called strikes. I only get a strike called if I swing at a pitch and miss. So I can wait there and look at thousands of companies day after day, and only when I see something I understand and when I like the price at which it's selling, then if I swing, if I hit it, fine. If I miss it, it's a strike. But it's an enormously advantageous game, and it's a terrible mistake to think you have to have an opinion on everything. You only have to have an opinion on a few things. In fact, I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. 4 or 5 will probably do it over time. So I don't worry too much about the things I don't understand. If you understand some of these businesses that are coming along and can spot things on, if you can spot on Amazon, for example, I mean, it's a tremendous accomplishment what Jeff Bezos has done. And I tip my hat to him. He's a wonderful businessman. He's a good guy, too. But could I have anticipated that he would be the success and 10 others wouldn't be? I'm not good enough to do that. But fortunately, I don't have to. I don't have to form an opinion on Amazon. And I did form an opinion on the Bank of America, and I've formed an opinion on Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's been around since 1886. There's 1.8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products sold every day. Now, if you take 1 penny and get 1 penny extra, that's $18 million a day. And 18 million times 365 is 7 billion, 3 less 730 billion, or $6,570 million. So annually, $6,570 million from 1 penny. Do you think Coca-Cola is worth a penny more than Joe's Cola? I think so. So, and I've got about 127 years of history that would indicate it. So those are the kind of decisions I like to make.
If we could just hear from you on your thoughts on the pros and cons of the public versus private company.
Yeah. Carol and I belong to a group that started in 1968 called the Graham Group. We meet, and one time we had a session with 2 enormously successful people on the panel, and I assigned the topic, and one of them said he'd give up half his net worth to be private again, and the other one, gave exactly the reverse answer. I started out feeling like I wanted to be private. I'd run a private partnership, and I just enjoyed it that way. I like looking in the mirror and making decisions and not getting any negative votes, and it was a lot of fun. When we distributed a bunch of Berkshire shares as part of winding up the partnerships, and it already was a public company. It became more public then. And over time, I found it actually more fun to run a public company, but it's become a podium. It's where I can play out my ideas and explain why I do things and have a lot of fun. And Carol has my letter to make them more readable, and it's a teaching mechanism even. I would say, generally speaking, that, when people come to me with wonderful businesses, and they do, and they talk about selling them to me, my first advice is don't sell them. I mean, a wonderful business they're too rare. And if you've got one in your family, keep it unless something forces you to sell it. So I would say stay private unless you have a need to go public in terms of financing or in terms of solving the problems of ownership within a family that's going in different directions or something. But you can always go public, and unless there's a compelling reason to do it, which is usually fundraising, I don't see the reason to do it. And going private, you can do it, but that creates a lot more problems because you really have, now you're faced with buying out your partners unilaterally, and Michael Dell just went through that. That's not something I would want to do. You're lucky in life if you can find your passion. I tell the students, you may have to take a job or two. You got to eat, but never give up searching for the job that's your passion. Try to find the job that you would have if you were independently rich. That's the job I have. And when you find that job, the job that causes you to be excited every day and forget about the pay, and where you associate with people you love, doing what you love, it doesn't get any better than that. My partner Charlie is 89, and we were talking about that this weekend. I'm 82, he's 89. We do what we love every day with people we love, and they seem to like us okay. So, how can it be any better? And just cost of living does not equate to standard of living. And the standard of living is, achieving what you want to achieve, working with people that you love, and you don't need that much money. Aside, I love to ride around in a private plane. I will totally acknowledge that. Leaving that out, I basically, leaving out taxes and charity and things like that, I can easily live on $100,000 a year, and I wouldn't live better if I had 8 houses, if I had a 400-foot yacht or anything of the sort. I've been on 400-foot yachts and I've been in a lot of fancy houses, but I'm in a house that I bought 55 years ago. It's warm in the winter, it's cool in the summer, it has everything I wanted, plus it has all kinds of good memories. My kids have good thoughts about it. I can't imagine living any better. I paid $31,500 for it. I could pay $31 million for a house, and it wouldn't do for me what this present house does. The most important thing, aside from the things I've talked about already, is really who you associate with. You want to associate with people that are better than you are. I mean, basically, you'll go in the direction of the people that you associate with, and you want to have the right heroes. You want people, if you want to emulate somebody, you better pick very carefully who you want to emulate. And when, obviously, you can't pick your parents. They're going to have an enormous influence on you, but you don't get a choice on that. But you get choices as you go down the line, and who you admire, who you want to copy, and the most important for most people in terms of that decision is their spouse. It's also important in terms of a partner in business, but the partner in life is the most important one. You want to pick a spouse that's better than you are, and then he or she, and you hope they don't figure it out too fast. When you get to my age, you will not measure how well you've done by how much money you've got. I can guarantee you that. You'll all do fine on money anyway. I mean, think about it. 7 hours a day, you're in a bed. You got exactly the same mattress I've got. If you don't, we'll sell it to you at the Furniture Mart. So we're on a parity. I can't outdo you, in terms of my sleeping enjoyment. You can match it by buying this mattress, which we'll give you a special price on. Just mention my name. We eat at the same places, We eat at Dairy Queen, particularly if you're in my position because we own it. But we eat at McDonald's and Burger King, and when I leave here, I'll stop by a fast food place on the way. So our eating experiences are the same. We travel the same. I mean, I had a 10-year-old car up till about a year ago, and it just doesn't make any difference to me. They all work. We live in a place that's warm in the winter and it's cool in the summer, and we watch the Super Bowl on big screen TV. You do it, I do it. We dress more or less the same. I mean, I pay more for my clothes, but they look cheap when I put them on. So we're really on a parity. Yeah. So the money isn't going to be that big a deal. Everybody in this country is going to, with the intelligence this group has and the energy you have, you're going to do well. So what's the difference? What really counts? Well, I would say that you will measure, health is enormously important, and that's a matter of a fair amount of luck. I mean, so I'm not shortchanging it. I'm just saying you can't do too much about that. But you will measure your success in life by how many, and extent, whether it's the people you want at 70 or whatever the age may be. You'll measure it by how many of them really love you, in the end. I mean, you can't buy love. I mean, it doesn't work. You can buy sex, you can buy testimonial dinners, you can buy your name on buildings, you can do all kinds of things. But the only way you get to be, love is to be lovable. It's kind of irritating, actually. If you got a lot of money, it'd be more fun to just write out a check for $1 million. So everybody, from now on loves me. But it doesn't work that way. And in fact, the only way is to be lovable. And I've got this friend who came out of Auschwitz and had at least one member of the family die there. And what is it now? It's 60 years later. She still, when she looks at people, it's a Polish Jew, when she looks at people, the question she asks herself in determining who she really trusts as friends, the one question in her mind is, would they hide me? Now, when you get to be 70, if you've got a lot of people that would hide you, you've had a successful life. I know people who have a tremendous amount of money, no one would hide. Their own kids wouldn't hide them. I mean, they really wouldn't. I mean, their business associates wouldn't, or anybody else. If it really came down to it, they don't have anybody's respect. They've got their attention maybe with money or something of the sort, but nobody loves them. And my friend Tom Murphy at Cap Cities TV, I mean, dozens of people would hide Murph. All kinds of people would hide my wife. Ben Graham, a lot of people would have. My dad would have had a number. And then, like I say, that I can tell you people that everybody may pay homage to them, and the kids may put up with them and hope they don't change their will or something. But the truth is that nobody would hide them. And if you've got a lot of people that would hide you when you get to be 70, you will have had a very successful life. By far, the best investment you can make is in yourself. I mean, for example, communication skills. I tell the students that come that they're going to graduate schools and business, and they're learning all these complicated formulas and all that. If they just learn to communicate better, and both in writing and in person, they increase their value at least 50%. And I mean, if you can't communicate, somebody says, it's like winking at a girl in the dark. Nothing happens, basically. And you have to be able to get forth your ideas, and that's relatively easy. I did it myself with the Dale Carnegie course. Some people wish I'd taken a shorter course now in terms of my talking later on. But it's just hugely important. And if you invest in yourself, nobody can take it away from you. Everything you do learn is cumulative. I mean, that doesn't mean that industries stay good forever or businesses stay good forever. But learning to think about business models, what I learned at 20 is useful to me now. What I learned at 25 is useful to me now. And so it's not a field that changes dramatically in terms of the underlying principles. It's like physics. I mean, there's underlying principles. Now they're doing all kinds of things with physics they weren't doing 50 years ago. But if you know if you got the principles, if you know what makes a good business, if you know what makes a good manager, if you know what makes a good product, and you learn that in one business, there is some transference to other businesses as you go along, and you learn what things you're not going to understand. I mean, knowing what to leave out is just as important as knowing what to focus on. And I don't think I can win every game. Somebody said, "How do you beat Bobby Fischer?" You play him any game except chess. So I don't play Bobby Fischer chess. And there's a lot of value to learning that over time, and learning what you're good at and what you're not good at.
All of you in this room have the brains to do extremely well in life. You've all got the energy to do extremely well in life. And then the question is, how do you apply it? If you've got a 200 horsepower motor, do you get 200 horsepower out of it? Do you get your full potential, or do you get 100 horsepower or 50 horsepower? Now, there's two things that can hold you back in getting the full horsepower out of your engine, whatever it may be. All of you have big enough engines. And one of those is a lack of education, but that probably isn't going to happen to very many people in this room. If you did have a lack of education, if you didn't have a chance to get a decent education in life, it wouldn't make any difference what that potential was, because you'd never unlock it. But the second most important thing, and equally as important, is in terms of the habits that you develop, in terms of what you do with yourself. When we hire people, we look for three qualities. We look for integrity, we look for intelligence, and we look for energy. But if they don't have the first one, integrity, the other two will kill you. Because if you're hiring somebody without integrity, you really want them to be dumb and lazy, don't you? I mean, last thing in the world you want for them is to be smart and energetic. So smart and energetic only goes with integrity.
But I do tell those students, that if I gave you a car and it'd be the only car you get in the rest of your life, you'd take care of it like you can't believe. Any scratch, you'd fix that moment. You'd read the owner's manual. You'd keep a garage and do all these things. And you get exactly one mind and one body in this world. And you can't start taking care of it when you're 50. By that time, you'll have rusted out if you haven't done anything. So you should really make sure that you just remember that you just got one mind and body to get through life with and to do the most with it.
One of the things you do in your annual report, which has become a classic, is you will discuss what went wrong, like Dexter, and what you learned,
how
and what you learned from it.
Sure,
tough to do.
Well, it's very important to recognize mistakes. I mean, if somebody goes around and says, I never made a mistake, I mean, you quit listening to them. I mean, they're in a dream world. So facing up to it. It's a little like in terms of discussing issues. You should be able to discuss the other fellow's position just as well as you can discuss your own. So I mean that's part of thinking well, and certainly part of making good decisions in business is recognizing the poor decisions you've made and why they were poor, and that doesn't mean you never do the same thing. I mean because sometimes it was a freak situation, but I have made lots of mistakes. I'm going to make more mistakes, but. Babe Ruth struck out a lot of times. I mean, it's the name of the game that you do it. You don't want to expect perfection in yourself. You want to strive to do your best, but it's too demanding to expect perfection in yourself. And it does some good to recognize them and not start trying to go around kidding people about them.
What other habits did you cultivate in your 20s and your 30s that you now see as being foundational to your success as a business person?
Well, I knew a lot about what I do when I was 20. I mean, I really read a lot, and I aspired to learn everything that I could about the subject. So intellectually, I knew a lot. I did not know a lot about human behavior. I mean, that you can't learn really out of reading books, but it's very important to understand people. And I say to the students, just imagine you could buy, or you could be given 10% of the future earnings of one person that you know among everybody you know. Now, are you going to pick the person that's the smartest? Are you going to pick the person that can dance the best or that can run the fastest or anything like that?
It's the right height.
No, anything. No. You're going to pick the person that has the right habits, that is cheerful, generous, gives other people credit for what they do. And when you look at all of the qualities that you admire in other people, which would cause you to pick that person, say to yourself, which of those qualities can't I have myself? Because they are, you determine whether you have them. So just write them down on a piece of paper. Who is the person that you admire the most or like the best? Why do I like them? And just write down and then say, which of these can I do myself? And the truth is you can do them. And then you also, if you really want to carry it to the next extreme, you pick the person you dislike the most. And why do you dislike that person? They're never fair about things, basically. They always claim more credit than they're due and everything. And write down those qualities and say, if you dislike that in some other person, why in the world would you want to have those yourself? So you just get rid of those. And it's a pretty simple thing to do, but you want to be the person that if you could pick your best friend, that you would have the same qualities.
As a general matter, as a one piece of specific financial advice, I would say, avoid credit cards. Just forget about them. We're in various businesses that issue credit cards. The American public loves credit cards. But if you start revolving debt on credit cards, you're going to be paying 18 or 20%. And you can't make progress in your financial life going around borrowing money at 18 or 20%. You can make a lot of money by lending it out at 18 or 20% over time. If you can find anybody that's good that will borrow from you. But you don't want to be on the side of the equation that's always behind in life. I was lucky. I'd saved about $10,000 by the time I got out of school. That $10,000 was really worth millions I might have earned later on, because after you get a family and everything, the expenses roll in. But those were my tools to work with, but it was only because I was ahead of the game. If you're behind the game by $10,000 at some point and paying 18 or 20% interest on it, you will never, you'll never get out of it. So the trick, I've got a partner that says, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. And And that's true in financial matters as well. You want to figure out where you don't want to be ahead of time and avoid that. And I get about a dozen letters a day from people who are having terrible problems. And there are two reasons why they have terrible problems. One is a number of them have had health problems of some sort. I mean, they have really been hit by or somebody in their family has been hit by some kind of catastrophic illness. And that is it's a terrible thing to happen to any family. And they run up bills they can't pay, and really only society can solve that one in terms of protecting people against that. That's just plain bad luck. But the other one is from people who run up credit card debt, and they're facing bankruptcy, or they've been through bankruptcy once before, and they owe a whole bunch of money, and they can't even pay the interest, let alone pay any principal. And half of my letters come from people like that, and that problem is avoidable. Catastrophic illness is not, but credit card debt is something you bring on yourself, and it's way better, it's way easier to stay out of trouble than to get out of trouble financially. And I will guarantee if you run up big credit card debt, you will be in trouble probably the rest of your life in terms of your financial situation. On the other hand, if you get ahead of the game, even it's on a very modest scale, so that money is coming in from investing, and people owe you money, or equities owe you ownership, you'll be way ahead of the game compared to paying it, paying your creditors every month. So my advice to you is, if you can't pay for it, don't buy it.
I was terrified, for example, both in high school and college. I don't know when it started, but I became terrified of public speaking. And I just couldn't do it. I mean, and so I arranged all my classes so I never had to do any public speaking. And I got to Columbia, and I saw an ad in the paper for a Dale Carnegie course. And I went down, it was somewhere in the mid-40s, and I gave the guy a check for $100, and I went back and stopped payment. I lost my nerve. And then I got out of Columbia actually when I was 20, and I came out to start selling securities in Omaha. And I realized I had to get up and be able to get up in front of people. I couldn't go through life this way. So I saw an ad again in the local paper that there was a Dale Carnegie course being given. I went down and I gave the fellow $100 in cash. And I became associated with 30 other people in the class. We couldn't stand up in front of a group and say our own name. I mean, it was pathetic. But that class changed my life in a big way. Wow. As a matter of fact, they used to give a pencil every week for whoever did the most with what they learned the previous week. And during that class, I proposed to my wife, and she accepted, and I won the pencil that week. So it's important. I mean, you've got to be able to communicate in life, right. And it's enormously important. And probably the schools, to some extent, underemphasize that. I mean, you start going for an MBA, and people think it's kind of beneath them to teach you about communication. But if you can't communicate, if you can't talk to other people and get across your ideas or write, you're giving up your potential. And anybody that's got a career potential of X, I guarantee it'll be 150% of X if they really learn how to communicate well. So that was a big part of really succeeding in my career. I have constructed a business that fits me. It's kind of crazy to spend your life painting if you're painting a subject you don't want to look at. I've gotten to paint my own painting in business on an unlimited canvas, in a way. It's a different sort of place. I work with a great group of people that make my life very easy and that take good care of me. We have 25 people in the office, and if you go back, it's the exact same 25, the exact same ones. We don't have any committees at Berkshire. We don't have a public relations department. We don't have investor relations. We don't have a general counsel. We don't have a human relations department. We just don't go for anything that people do just as a matter of form. It's exactly the life I like. And it's not work to me. It's just a form of play, basically. If you go back to when I started my partnership in 1956 that Berkshire came out of, there were 7 people sitting there at a table having dinner, relatives primarily, and I said, here's the partnership agreement. It's done under Nebraska law. It's 4 or 5 pages. You don't need to read it. But I said, here's a little half-page, what I call the ground rules, and I want you to read these, And if you feel okay about that, about the interaction, what the expectations are, and all of that sort of thing, then we'll join forces. And if you don't, it's fine. Other people have, but we shouldn't be partners. I mean, if I'm going to have a partnership with somebody, I want it to be compatible. It is, and when you have a public company, you can't control who comes in. I can't control some guy that comes in and thinks we're going to pay big dividends or split the stock or something like that. So by my actions and my communications and everything, I want to attract the people from the public market that I want, and I want to keep the others away. Costco was built. Saul Price, who started the Price Club and that thing, he sat down and figured out the customer he didn't want. And he set up a system that would keep away the customer he didn't want. Who did he not want? He didn't want somebody buying a quart of milk with somebody behind him with a basket of $200 worth of goods waiting for that. So he put in a membership fee, and by putting in a membership fee, he killed all the drop-in business, the business that belonged to the 7-Eleven. We want Berkshire to keep out people who have expectations about us that are different than ours. I mean, good for them, and I hope they find somebody they fit. But if you're going to run a church, you want your seats to be filled by people that are generally want to listen to your form of religion, and you don't want it to change every week and say, gee, I need a new group, and I'll go out and talk to a bunch of investors and get them to come to my church this Sunday, because there's only so many seats in the church. There's 1,645,000 or so A equivalent shares, and those are the seats, and I want them occupied by people that are on the same page I am. Well, I was lucky that I got started early. I mean, it always helps if you get started early, and my dad happened to be in the investment business, so I would go down to his office on Saturdays, and so at age probably 7 or something, I started reading these books that were around the place, and so I had a 15-year jump on many people in a sense, and that helped a lot, and I was always fascinated by it. I knew what I wanted to do early, and I think that's a huge advantage too. And then you don't need a lot of brains in this business. I mean, I've always said if you got an IQ of 160, give away 30 points to somebody else, because you don't need it in investments. What you do need is emotional stability. You have to be able to think independently, and you have to be when you come to a conclusion, you have to really not care what other people say, and just follow the facts and follow your reasoning, and that's tough for a lot of people. That part I think I was just lucky with. I was born that way.
In terms of emotions, it's a truism that in investing, emotions are your enemy.
Absolutely.
That when the market's good, if you feel good, don't. If you feel bad, you should probably do it.
Right.
But how did you? What was that extra thing where so many will acknowledge that, and yet we saw in the current crisis they panicked while you went into seemingly potential disasters like GE and Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. I can't really tell you the answer. I mean, I didn't learn in school or anything. It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. And Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or two in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability. If somebody told me 10 years ago what was going to happen the next 10 years, we could have made a lot of money in the bond market together, But there's always a reason afterwards. Tomorrow's paper will say stocks went down today because of, but they didn't write it this morning's paper that stocks are going to go down today. You have to know what you don't know, and you have to make sure that what you don't know isn't all important. I mean, if there's 4 boxes there, you want to get to what is knowable and which is favorable. And there's things that you'll miss out on because they belong in the other 3 boxes, one of which will be favorable, another one that's favorable. And the fact that you're missing out on 90% of the stuff doesn't really make any difference if the 10% you do is right. Shortly after I met Bill Gates, Bill's dad asked each of us to write down on a piece of paper one word that would best describe what had helped us the most. Bill and I, without any collaboration at all, each wrote the word focus. Well, focus has always been a strong part of my personality. If I get interested in something, I get really interested. If I get interested in a new subject, I want to read about it, I want to talk about it, and I want to meet people that are involved in it. Well, I look at a lot of figures just in connection with our businesses. I like to get numbers. so I'm getting reports in weekly in some businesses. But that doesn't tell me what the economy is going to do 6 months from now or 3 months from now. It tells me what's going on now with our businesses. And it really doesn't make any difference in what I do today in terms of buying stocks or buying businesses, what those numbers tell me. They're interesting, but they're not guides to me. If we buy a business, we're going to hold it forever. So we're going to have good years, bad years, in between years, maybe a disastrous year some year. We care a lot about the price. We do not care about the next 12 months. Economic predictions just don't enter into our decisions. Charlie Munger, my partner, and I, in 54 years now, we've never made a decision based on an economic prediction. We make business predictions about what individual businesses will do over time, and we compare that to what we have to pay for them. But we have never said yes to something because we thought the economy was going to do well in the next year or 2 years, and we've never said no to anything because we were right in the middle of a panic even if the price was right.
How would you define true success?
Well, I've said many times that if you get to be 65 or 70 and later, and the people that you want to have love you actually do love you, you're a success. I've never seen anybody that reaches that age. I mean, I'm not talking about somebody that's in extreme poverty or pain or something, but I've never seen anybody that, if they have a lot of people that love them, that is other than happy. And I've seen some very, very wealthy people that they give testimonial dinners to and name schools after and everything. And nobody loves them. In my own case, I was sort of wired for capital allocation. And being wired for capital allocation a couple of 100 years ago in Nebraska wouldn't have been a thing. And even now, being born in various parts of the world, it wouldn't have meant much. But here I was in this soon-to-be very rich capitalistic system. And it just so happened that what I did paid off enormously in a market system like we have. And if I'd had a talent in some other area that was way less commercial, I mean, I would have had a good time doing it, but it wouldn't have paid off like this. But of course, Jay said it perfectly when he talked about, he's in there recording for himself, and the money comes afterwards. I mean, I got to do what I love. I mean, and it doesn't get any luckier than that. If you can spend your lifetime, and I'm 80 now, and doing things you love every single day. I mean, I would be doing what I do now, and I would have done it in the past, if the payoff had been in seashells or shark's teeth or anything else. If you can go to work every morning, I tap dance to work, and I come down, and every day's exciting. I like to sit and think. And I spent a lot of time doing that, and sometimes it's pretty unproductive, but I find it enjoyable to think about, particularly about business or investment problems. They're easy. It's the human problems that are the tough ones. Sometimes there aren't any good answers with human problems. There's almost always a good answer with money. I've got this rule, the first rule is don't lose, and the second rule is never forget the first rule. So it really isn't so much having a lot of brilliant decisions. It's just not really having some terrible ones. And frankly, I did learn from Ben Graham how to avoid ever having any disasters in investments. It wasn't that you were going to come up with the very smartest thing, but if you never have any significant losses, some singles and doubles will produce a lot of runs before you get through.
If you want another amazing Warren Buffett video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe. We'll see you there. You're pointing up, but it's going to be to your side. It's over here.
Oh, you're right.
We should all be pointing over there.
Over there. Okay.